Have you got fabric scraps? Well, let's be honest, we all do. And in today's tutorial, I've got the ultimate way of using them up. We're going to be doing the string quilt block. And I've been wanting to do this tutorial for a really long time. It's been on my list to do. But what inspired me to finally get it done was seeing Kate of Last Homely House. Well, she just did a really neat video on her version of this. So today I'm going to share you mine. I hope you enjoy it. Let me show you how to use up all those fabric scraps making a string quilt block. So the first thing to do is cut your scrap fabric into strips, and I've already started, and isn't this pile looking really pretty? Now you need to decide what width you'd like to cut your strips, and I decided to go with the same as Kate, and that was 1.5 inches wide. You can cut yours to whatever width you'd like, and some people even choose to do different widths, so they don't have to worry about any of the seams meeting up, because they definitely won't if you just cut random strips and sew them together. And those quilts look really awesome too. So let me just show you very quickly how I did cut my 1.5 inch strips. A really quick way of using up that scrap fabric. So I've got some scrap fabric pieces here, and particularly this one, it's a really odd shape, but that's okay. We need lots of different sizes for this quilt block. So I'll start with this one at the bottom, and then what I'm going to do is line up the edges just on one side here. Just like that. And then we could just take a regular ruler and cut, but I've actually been using my smaller Stripology ruler. I've got an extra large one, and I believe this size is a medium, which is perfect for sort of more scrap fabric projects. Then on my 0 mark, or the 0 on your ruler, so the edge of your ruler, I'm just going to line that up next to my edge there, but a little bit over, because that line, all those pieces there aren't cut perfectly straight. Then I'm just going to cut on my 0, and then I'm going to count in 1.5 inch increments. And I'll keep going until I have finished cutting all the fabric, and that was the last cut there. So then we'll just remove those pieces on the side there. All these pieces here are perfectly cut in our 1.5 inch strips. These pieces as well. Then you can see I've got a little bit of a scraggly bit there. I'll throw that out. This one didn't quite get the full 1.5 inch, so I'll pop that one aside. And then I don't believe that one did as well, so I'll put those both aside, and then I'll just trim off this raggedy edge here. So now these are all ready to go to put in my little bundle to make our quilt with. Now, of course, you could just use a regular ruler for that too. So the next thing we need is some fabric to use as our foundation, and then what we're going to be doing is sewing our strips onto it. Now, muslin is recommended for this because it's really nice and lightweight and 100% cotton. I couldn't find any muslin, but I found this really cheap quilting cotton that's really thin and light. So I'm just going to use that. It's actually got polka dots on it. So I'm just going to use it on the side where you see them the least. So actually I'm going to use it on the wrong side of the fabric. So we just need some muslin or some really nice thin cotton. And then we're going to cut it to the size we'd like our blocks. And I want mine at 6.5 inches square. So I've cut a whole heap here, and now we're going to get on to making our string block. So I've got my foundation piece here at the size that I'd like to make my quilt block, which is 6.5 inches square. Now what we're going to do is place our first piece of fabric on the diagonal from the top left-hand corner down to the bottom right-hand corner. And I've been enjoying putting light or low volume fabric as my first strip. And then at the end, I'll show you, you end up with this really neat pattern, but you could use any fabric you like. Just have fun with this and do this however you'd like to do it. But I'm going to start with low volume. And then what I want to make sure is that it's in the center, coming past the points at the top and the bottom of my square. And I can just see that through the fabric. That looks great. Then I'm going to take my next piece, and you can audition the pieces to check you're happy with how they look. And I think that looks like a lot of fun. So I'm going to use this one next. I'm going to place it right sides together and line up the edges. And I just want to make sure that it comes past the edge of our quilt block by about 1/2 inch at the top and the bottom, and that looks great to me. And then just for these first two strips, I will just pop a pin in just to keep them in place just in the center there. It doesn't have to be perfect. Now we're just going to sew along this edge. I've got my 1/4 inch foot on so I can get my 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm stitching at stitch length 2, and I'm using wonderful confetti thread. I'm starting about 1/2 inch away from the edge of my square there, which is about where that second strip starts. I'm just going to sew all the way down to the bottom. Coming right past about 1/2 inch, cutting my thread, removing my pin, and now let's press. I've got this new pressing mat that's new to me. Some of the ladies at the retreat had these and they're so amazing, especially if you travel and sew, like go on retreats and so on. This is just really nice and little to have on my sewing desk as I'm sewing so I can press, because you do press a lot making these blocks. So I'm just going to set the stitches there. And then I'm going to open it up, finger press, and then press. So now we're going to sew on our next piece, and it doesn't matter if you choose to carry on along this side or then start on this side. So I'm going to start on this side and take one of the pieces we cut earlier, and that looks really cute to me. I'm just going to place it right sides together again and make sure that it is coming past that square by, I think I said before about 1/2 inch, but sort of 1/4 to 1/2 inch is fine, because what happens is when that gets sewn on and we fold it over, we just want to make sure that it is coming past that square there. So when we're happy, we'll just press that down, make sure all these edges are lined up nicely, and now we'll sew along this edge. Okay, now at this point we could press, or we could sew our second piece onto this side, but I actually like to press and sort of watch it evolving. So just setting those stitches again, finger pressing and pressing. And isn't that looking cute? So now we're going to find our next piece. So let me just take this one. It's too small, but I personally wouldn't put that one there because it's just too close to this one. But again, you might like to have yours all with perhaps different but the same color fabrics going on either side or both sides, like really just have a play with it. But for my block, I'm trying to get a lot of contrast because I'm trying to be really crazy and scrappy, which does not come easy to me, but I think that looks really cute. So I'll just place that right sides together again, line up those edges and sew. So just pressing again, and can you see how that's just coming together really nicely? Isn't that looking pretty? I'm just going to give the whole thing a press because, you know, I just love pressing. I don't know, I find it really therapeutic and I kind of just start and can't stop. So that's just me. So now we're going to take our next piece, and I'm purposely going to grab this really long one, and I think that looks really nice there. So I'm just going to show you how it would work with a really long piece of fabric. So I would just do exactly the same. Place it right sides together, make sure it's coming past, and then I'm just going to sew just like we have been. So just starting that 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch past the square again. Okay, now I'll quickly press and show you how I'll trim this off. So now we need to cut this bit off. Now what you could do is you could just cut it off here and that would be perfectly fine. But if you're trying to be a little bit careful of your fabric so you can reuse maybe some really precious pieces, what I've been doing is turning it over to the back and then trimming it about 1/4 to 1/2 inch away from the edge of our square there, which just makes our square extra handy. And I'm not doing this perfectly by any means. I'm just cutting it just like that. And now I've got this strip that I can use for another piece. So that's what I've been doing with the really long pieces. Now what I'm going to do is just carry on until I get past the edges of the square. So now we need to trim up our block so that it measures, for me, 6.5 inches squared. Now I probably would have liked to have done a slightly bigger block, maybe 7.5 or 8.5 inches, but I have a square ruler at 6.5 inches squared and I didn't have any bigger, so I thought I just wanted to keep it really easy and quick and simple and fast by having a ruler exactly the right size to cut these blocks. So that's why I went with the 6.5. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find the diagonal line on my ruler and place it on top of my block so that that line is sitting right in the center of my light fabric. It doesn't have to be perfect, I'm just doing it by eye, and that looks pretty good. So now I'm just going to check all the sides and make sure my ruler is fitting within my block. I'm just going to check, and that's looking good to me. I could move it up a little bit, and this is where it was important to just sew a little bit past that square to make sure we were getting it all sewn down correctly. And then once I'm happy, I'm just going to trim all 4 sides. And I've got my rotating mat here, which is helpful. But if you don't have one, that's fine. Just use a regular mat. Okay, and there we go. There's our first block. Now, isn't that absolutely gorgeous? Let me show you the rest of my blocks and how this light strip here is going to work when we start sewing a lot of blocks and putting them together. So you can see here I've been busy making a whole heap of blocks, and isn't that just looking so fun and awesome? I really love how it's turning out. Now you can see the effect I've been getting with having that white piece in the center, and I really do love that. Now of course you don't have to do that if you don't want to. So I've got my finished block here. All I'll do is work out where it's going to go. And I've been trying to match them up so that there's not 2 of the same fabrics next to each other. And then, funnily enough, they seem to work pretty well wherever you put them. It's not often that I've been running into them hitting another piece that's the same fabric as them. Does that make sense? Anyway, I think you know what I'm trying to say. So I did just want to talk about this cool little felt board that I've got here. I've always wanted one, and sometimes they can be really expensive. Well, I saw this one advertised on Instagram, and then I popped over to Amazon and got it. It was around $40 or $50, so I'll put the link down below for you if you're interested in checking that out too. But I've really been enjoying it, and I loved that it was sort of a peachy pink color. I'm actually thinking of buying a second one and turning this one on its side and having a second one next to it, because it is just so handy and useful having this in my sewing room. I can't believe what a game changer it's been, because usually I'd be putting these all over my bed, and it's just so hard to see how they're looking like that. They're all a bit wobbly and hard to like climb on the bed to move blocks if you're not happy. I'm rambling, but anyway, I'm loving my new felt board as well, so I just thought I'd tell you about that while I'm here. So I hope you give this string quilt block a try. It's so much fun and a really neat way to use up your scrap fabric. Now I've made a free quick reference sheet for you where it tells you how many blocks you'll need to make for different size quilts. And I've also done that for different size blocks. So I started at 6.5 inch, 7.5 inch, and 8.5 inch. So for example, if you'd like to make this in an 8.5 inch, I've worked out how many blocks you'll need to make and what size that quilt will be. And to get a copy of that, just scan the QR code now, and I'll also put a link down below. I'm also going to put a link down below for Kate's video from Last Homely House. I just love her YouTube channel so much, so do go and check that out. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate you. Happy sewing.